All right, thanks for joining. Today is May 15th, and this is the architecture review meeting for session one. Um, we have a couple items. The first one is a quick one, just like an announcement. Um, we made some changes to the scheduling for this meeting um, based on some feedback and discussion we had in session two a couple weeks ago. Um, we wanted to increase engagement for APAC. I know it's the times that we had session one and session two maybe aren't the best for some team members, especially in India. And we wanted to make sure it was inclusive for all people. So what we did is I put out a poll just to see what people thought would be best, and it seemed like the overwhelming winner of the options we laid out was to add another session, and then maybe alternate the cadence of the meeting. So now we have, you know, three different times for this, three different sessions, but they meet every 3 weeks, and so every week would have a different session. So yeah, hopefully that works well for people. We'll see how it goes. We can always change it again later if we feel like maybe it's not frequent enough. So basically, this meeting won't meet again for another 3 weeks, but we'll have other opportunities for other times as well. And yeah, any questions about that before we move to the next topic? All right. Um, Sri, you have the next topic. You mind taking that one?
Hello, hi. Me and Tyler, we are working on synchronizing the Zora uh, subscription objects to the local storage of those objects. So the idea is that instead of making the calls to Zora all the time to fetch the subscriptions data and everything, we are caching those records within our own databases. The idea is that like when the Zora makes a call out to like, oh, like the subscription has been updated, it has been provisioned, created, etc. Our job is to then fetch those records, save it locally, and keep on provisioning. And so when the user fetches those fetches their subscription data, so instead of getting it from the Zora, we show them locally. So the whole basis of this idea is to rely on those callouts. Now that when the callout comes, we will save, we will do whatever we are doing right now, provision, etc. But then what happens when the callout is missed out? If the CustomersDot application is not working, if there is some problems whatsoever, etc., etc., the callout, there is a high chances of callouts being missed out. And then the local Zora object records is not in sync with the remote Zora entity anymore. So we are planning to introduce a cron job, which will actually run every hour, which will make an API request to the callout histories API of the Zora to fetch only the failed records. Like Zora actually has this failed only Boolean, which you pass it into the API. It will return all the failed objects which did not reach customers.application application or which did come to the customers.dot or got 400, 404 or any other errors and the customers.dot could not process it. So our job is to run every hour looking for those records and then finding the subscription ID from that and make sure that my local subscription is in sync with the remote Zora object. So this is what we are planning to do. We are not trying to fix any bugs. We are not trying to provision as per the first phase. We are not trying to provision any callouts which has been missed by the customers application. We are just making sure that my local Zora record is in sync with the remote Zora object. I see Vitaly has the third point from there.
Um, yes, I just need to find my first comment. Okay, yeah, so found. Um, so yeah, I got the idea, and basically like resolving this particular issue about syncing the local instance is fine. Um, but I think we could do it in a slightly different way, because we, for instance, right now pretty much think about the same thing with Lena, because we want to sync the local product catalog by using the Zuora callouts. And we're thinking about storing all callouts that we receive in CustomersDot in the database to ensure we have them for various purposes, like for auditing, for logging, and to increase our output. So, like, for instance, when the customers don't receive a call out, we just save it to the database, kick off a sidekick worker, and let it just do its job. So I think probably this case falls under the same conditions. And like, instead of trying to work around this thing, we could find the root cause and just resolve it. And that will be relatively easy, I think, because as far as I know, our Zuora callbacks controller pretty much does almost all things that we need, except that it doesn't save the callouts to the database. So we can like receive, save, and process it later. That increases the chances that CustomersDot will process any callout, any received callout. Just respond to Zuora that everything is fine. Like one major. Oh, sorry, I'm like jumping through my like points throughout the document, so please stop me when you want to. The cron job, if you run it locally, as far as I know, we use Redis to store it. And if you shut down, so like in order to have this cron job run, you need to have CustomersDot.local instance up and running. But when you shut down it, Redis will save a database snapshot to the disk, and if you accidentally like delete it, then the job will wait for another hour. And if you like constantly starting and stopping your local CustomersDot instance, there is a chance that this current job will never like run actually.
I can answer for the first things first. The idea of saving it in the database sounds good so that we can recall everything. But as pointed out, this is only possible when I get the call out. So when I get the call out, I save it in the database, I work on it, all good. What happens the scenario when I don't get the call out? Now you mentioned that we should work on something to know why the call out failed. That's something we should be doing already. Right now, before previously, why the call out was never received. We are happy to work on that as the case comes by, but I'm just making sure till I work on that fix, my local is always in sync with the remote. Because the whole idea as of now is that my local is in cached with the remote object. If at any point that starts to break, this whole idea of local caching breaks. So saving it locally, everything might sounds good, but the whole idea is what if I don't get the call out? So that's why we are trying to first fetch, okay, did any call out missed? Then work on that. The other thing, what you mentioned about cron not working. So the basic idea is, or the thing is, the Zuora will only give the last 3 days call out history. I cannot fetch, like, tell me what happened in the last 3 years, what all call out I missed. Now, we are running the call out every hour. And when I successfully get all the information, what I need, we save the last success time within the database, saying that this is the last time we got the call out. Fetch me what happens after that. And if it's after that is more than 3 days, then we're not going to get the data anyhow. So that case requires a different story. We are also thinking to do a daily cron job running every night, fetching all the synchronizations, what updated in the last 1 day to make sure that everything is in sync. But that's for something to look in the future. For now, our job is just to make sure that at every end of the hour, my local database is in sync with the remote database with only the information what I missed.
How confident are you? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there is like in theory could be the case if I go out of office for a week, then when I came back, I can't receive any missed call outs in this case. I feel like I think like so there is like area of responsibility. So Zora sends call out, like you mentioned, 3 times by default to the CustomersDot. We've had like intervals like equal to 30 minutes or so, I believe, by default. Then it's like ends. So that means that Zora sends a call out and our application is unable to handle it like 3 times. So I feel like that's our area of responsibility and we should take a look into it, why the CustomersDot was unable to process these callouts.
I think there's more to that, Vitaly. Sometimes it could be Zora's fault, or it could be network fault, right? Sometimes Zora may just miss the call out, and then we don't know why they just didn't send it, right? It could be their problem as well. I think I still think this is our responsibility to solve it, and that's why a pull model may help there too, right? So if we just get the call outs, then we know which ones we can get them anytime. Basically, we don't have to rely on the retries, which is what Zezim does as well, right, at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I just had one point to add, and I'm not talking just in specific of failed callouts, but in terms of all callouts, like especially when we have a new environment that we spin up, then we create a separate notification profile for it, and which basically mirrors the same set of callout configurations, just that the URL is different. So, this is something that I'm thinking from a long-term perspective, but if we have a centralized place where we store callouts from all environments, then the customers.application application can either poll on a need basis or the application itself can forward these callout request to the customers.application. application. We just don't have to mirror the same set of call out notifications. It's just a lot of maintenance. And, we've seen like issues in the past where a certain call out doesn't work in a particular environment. And if a team introduces a new call out, it just has to be updated for all these call out profiles.
I like that idea. I would throw in one caveat there that we probably don't want one central place. We probably want 2, one production, one for not production. From an audit standpoint, mixing production data and not production data within the same system is probably going to bite us. So I like the idea, but we should probably have 2 of them rather than 1.
Yeah, and we will
stay
end
on
up
the
with,
service
with like, oops, sorry. Yeah, and we will end up with like replicating the whole Zora database in our environment. That's not a really good idea because right now we try to work around the Zora problems in our application, and that affects our value stream and our product because we have to work around the Zora problems. Zora has their own SLI and SLEs that they provide to customers. If there is a problem like Zora is unable to deliver a callout, we should ask them, hey, why this particular callout was never delivered to our system? Because instead of focusing on improving the life of our customers, we are working on fixing Zora bugs and issues. That's not what we're supposed to do, actually.
I think it's I see your point, Vitaly. I think I think there's a balance there, right? We definitely want to make Zora accountable here. If there's some errors there, we definitely want them to fix that. At the same time, I don't think Zora has ever been reliable. We have weekly issues with Zora just going offline randomly. You can even see in the last week how many, issues they've had as well. So I think while we shouldn't be replicating what Zora does, I think we need to have some sort of caching, right? Which is what this whole thing is about, just to make sure that, okay, if Zora is down, right, our customers are not affected. Because I think one thing is to make sure that Zora is accountable for any problems they have. But the other side of the story is that I just don't personally trust them, right? I guess I could say that for any third-party API, but we need to take into account that they may go down, and unfortunately, they go down very frequently. We don't want our customers being affected. I think some sort of caching makes sense there to avoid that.
Yeah, GitLab also goes down. Should we actually copy some of data to our database then?
I don't think.
Yeah, I'm trying to
I don't
say
think it's
that.
the same though.
Well, I'm trying to say that we probably like try to introduce unnecessary complexity to make our application really complicated, which it is right now, because we have so many moving pieces in our application that sometimes it's really hard to catch what is going on there. And so probably we should like keep things more simple. Like I like the idea of having a cron job, but probably like instead of like let this job pull the failed callouts, but probably we should also store the callouts in our database. All callouts, I mean.
I wanted to raise two things about the cron job. The first one was if we pull for the last hour, we might be pulling things that are still yet to be retried by Swara. So are we trying to pull the things that we know will fail or already fail, all the 3 retries? Because I think the retry span over an hour. And the other thing was that if we fetch and keep the interaction scope to sync in the subscription, but not triggering the provision. And I know that subscription is an entirely new record, but I think we need to be to review if our provision system relies at some point that the underlying order record, it's in the state, like in the state relative to the latest provision. Kind of, if we fast forward this record, are we potentially getting in the middle of the provision itself? So if we are syncing the subscription also as part of a provision, I think it might be even safer to trigger the provision at that point. If we know that this callout failed to make it to CustomersDot, we know that it's a pending provision. At that point, I think it might be safer to trigger the provision itself and let the sync happen as part of it, just to avoid, fast forwarding a record that might be then not suitable for the provision of a previous state. Because the provision itself, it's a complicated process right now. And there is already code that pulls all these records as part of the auditing. And I think that code can be reused. And to support whatever, all the feedback that was provided earlier, if we have this polling system that every hour kind of like just stores everything from Swara in our system, not just failed, but all, we can use that log to run the audit. And at that point, we run the audit every 2 days for an entire day. We will not be hitting Swara.
Coming back to the first question, like why not? So what happens if we fetch the data which Zora is about to retry again? So the idea over here is that like when the callout comes to us, what we do is like we will be going to the Zora. I was like, oh, okay, like you have a new subscription, create, update, whatsoever. Give us that information. We save that information locally. Now, this information is not bound to change. For the reason is simple because that if a new subscription is updated or amended, a new version is created. That means that new version also has to be with us in our database. So the idea is that even if you happen to retry or whatsoever, when I fetch that record failed only, which Zora will retry, I am bound to get the same information in my database. The reason we are not provisioning, that's the answer, even if we happen to fetch the data if the Zora is about to retry. So when they retry, when I fetch that information and try to save locally, I will have a matching record and it will not be updated. Second thing is why we are not provisioning. We might in the future or whatsoever, we are not trying to solve any bugs over here, which is already in the system. Our job is to make sure that my local record sync is in sync with the remote Zora subscription object. We can work on that on the future. Like let's work on provisioning it. Let's work on saving it in the whole call out within the database or whatsoever. This is a first step where I am making sure my local Zora record is in sync with the remote one. Now, we also talked about like why not fetch all of the callouts? Why failed only? We can put failed only false, fetch all of it, and do an audit. We can do that, but we thought of doing that in the future if we somehow notice that doing all of the callouts rather than only the failed only is more suitable than doing only the failed only ones. So to begin with, we are going to start with only the failed only to see how we are progressing with our local record sync with the remote Zora sync, and then we might move forward on syncing all of the callouts in the last 1 hour. For the whole day objects, instead of callouts only give for the last 3 days. If I happen to run my cron job every night, imagine the scenario where I'm not able to run for 2 nights and I'm not able to get the third day object anymore. There is a Z Zora SQL, SQL, which is present, which has a query which says that select ID or something from subscription where updated date is greater than or equal to something than something. So if I happen to run my cron job and save that date into my database, I can run this ZSQL object, which will give me all the subscriptions which has been updated in the last 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. I get all the IDs. I send it to my sync object that will fetch, put it, and make sure that it's happening. If any of them are not the records, what we fetch, matching our database, we can raise a log saying that, like, okay, something is not matching. Then we can work on to it, why they are not matching, what happened. That is something in the future, that to run for every day. This is only to make sure that like something which happened in the last 1 hour, in terms of the callouts, I have that data with me.
Okay, I understand that. I still want to highlight that this just syncing, it might have a side effect, you know, in the provision process itself. So I think it's still worth reviewing just in case, because
I can answer that as well. So you have, sorry, I forgot to answer that on the orders, whether we still have the subscription saved with us or not, right? When we are doing the provisioning, we don't do that. As of now, so when we get a call out, we check like, okay, find active by the subscription name. So while getting the call out, in those meantime, 4 versions of the call outs have happened, 4 changes to the subscriptions have happened. We get the most active topmost one. That's the one which we get to do the provisioning of. The only case where that does not happen is when the subscription is suspended, because the active find by name returns false. How do we check whether the subscription is suspended or not? We actually check the callout parameter. So in the callout, we have this, like what state it has sent as. So then that state is checked. Oh, is the state is suspended? Let me do the job of calling the cron job to schedule at in the future when the subscription is getting suspended. So we do not rely on any of the local or the Zora objects to know whether we are actually going to be creating or not. What we do as of now is fetch for the Zora saying find by name. Get me the active version, the topmost version, find by name. We fetch that from that Zora and we work on that. That's what we do because we don't save Zora as of now, Zora subscription. Instead of doing that, we fetch it for you, we save it, you take it from us locally. That's the only thing what we are doing. Nothing different.
Okay, seems like you've reviewed that.
Yeah, it seems like this might be an additive process versus something that could introduce a side effect, at least at this point. I mean, yeah, it seems like this is just about syncing and shouldn't affect other processes, but let's see how it goes.
We have two right now. So what we are calling with the Zora or anything, we have introduced a class. It's called Zora. Now this Zora has a feature flag, which when turned on can call Zora locally, and when turned off, call Zora remote. So if any of the times we feel that like, oh, okay, local things is not happening, it's just behind a one feature flag. And then it starts doing the way it is supposed to do, like it was doing before.
I think that point is kind of close to what Bishwa you mentioned, maybe further up in the doc about let's see, when will we use the local copy as the source of truth, or will we always be in doubt if the local copy is stale? So that kind of touches on it a little bit. So we'll have, a class that you can use to fetch subscriptions, and that'll be kind of agnostic as to whether you're fetching from the remote or fetching from local. You just use this class, and then based on a feature flag, it'll know whether to fetch, local versus remote. We'll still have the specific classes where you can use to fetch. If you you always want to fetch from a remote, then you can still do that. Because there'll be cases where you want to do that. I mean, one being, obviously the syncing mechanism, we're going to want to pull from remote in that case, and some other places probably as well. But as far as if we'll always be in doubt, I think the ideal state is that with these syncing mechanisms and sort of the redundancies that we're planning, hopefully we won't be in a place where we have a lot of doubt, but that's also kind of why we have this safety net of the feature flag for a while.
Thanks, Tyler. That does answer my question. And since after the explanation, looks like it's more like having a 2 or 3 replica of a database. Like one is read replica and one is write replica, and you can probably do the read only from read replica. Like let's say we want to show subscription management page. I mean, it should be probably fine if it's a bit stale, like if the user doesn't see latest subscription that they bought, or like latest additional seats that bought. And if something that's probably a bit critical, then probably we can think about getting or like fetching the latest record from the Zora always, something like that. But yeah, thanks.
Do we have any last synced on thing in the database, or have you thought about that? And should we monitor that? Like, what happens if how do we know that this sync is working?
We have one table created which will save the last success sync at, because that would be the start time for the next sync. So basically the idea would be like, okay, like I have got this information till here. So if imagine my 2 cron jobs did not run, the CustomersDot was down or anything, then when the cron job picks up, it will say like, okay, give me for the last 3 hours or 4 hours, when was the last successful sync happened. The idea is it's failed only. We are totally reliable on our CustomersDot application. It's well written. It's definitely nothing's missed out. This is just making sure that like there are no failed callouts. That's it. Like it's just making sure. So we are not expecting a lot of data to arrive. That's how it should be. So we are expecting 0 data to arrive. But yes, we do have the last success sync saved in the database.
And that would be for the failed job sync, like that whole process we're talking about. Each record that we're saving locally also has timestamps to let us know, when it was created and when it was updated, in our system.
We also have versionings on that table. So if in case the custom fields are updated or something gets updated, we can go and check the logs, like what updated at what time. So we kept versions on the subscription objects as well. So we don't have to rely for Zora for that. Like, hey, did the customers somehow change the custom value? Because when you do that, a new version is never created for the subscription. So it's the same version, just a different custom values. We are doing that versioning locally as well. Locally in the sense in the database.
Stepping back a minute, we're talking about the feature flag to divert where it is that we source data from. Feature flag is cool for doing everything in mass. Is there any thought about making like a object or method specific way of saying, no, seriously, go and fetch this one and default that to whatever the feature flag says?
I mean, the feature flag is, you can, like when you're writing the code base and you think that you don't want to rely on the local and you only want to rely on the remote, you can use the Zora remote dot something something. That would become literally the remote. So that means you're making sure that you're fetching remote.
So the mechanism is just call the other method instead.
Yes.
Okay. There is a mechanism. Cool.
Aish pointed out that we are over time. Feels like we're having a productive conversation. I'm willing to stay around if we want to continue it, but also happy to drop. I mean, feel free to drop if you need to. Any other thoughts on this? Otherwise, we can stop.
I had a sort of a point in letter H. So the way I'm thinking about this is, in sort of a perfect world, you could just rely only on callouts. If Zora was always reliable, if CustomersDot was always reliable, you wouldn't have a need for a syncing mechanism. You just normally receive data from Zora. But that's obviously not the case. So we're trying to build a system that's more redundant. And that's where these resyncing mechanisms come in place. So I sort of see 3 scenarios. The first is a full sync, where it's your very first time when you're spinning up an application, you're seeding the database, and you're just doing a full data download. This obviously takes a lot of time. It's not performant, so you're trying not to do it often, but sometimes it's necessary. The second part is a 24-hour sync, which is what you've already been talking about, Shri, which is just trying to prevent 24-hour drift. So this is when you're looking at like last updated at timestamp, and just getting whatever's been changed in the last 24 hours. And then the third scenario that I see is sort of on demand, which is used in sort of really important or fail-safe types of scenarios where you have to get the latest version and you have to get it right. And in this case, you could use remote. And you can sort of flag in which specific use cases you want to use this. But that's kind of how I see the different scenarios that have been laid out. I'm not sure if this framing's helpful or if it's just a repeat of what's already been discussed. But just wanted to summarize.
I think it does help also in a way that we need. I feel like we need to figure out like what operation is kind of critical and what is like non-critical, right? And then we can have this logic where, like, if it's something non-critical, then probably a data that was last synced an hour ago is fine, something like that. And if it's something critical, then yeah, of course we need to use Jira Remote to get the latest data.
Yeah, that process of starting to use the local database like utilization, that's for phase 3. We're currently in phase 2, like the sub epic, which is going to take us a little bit to get there. But eventually, when we do get to phase 3 and we start making those decisions, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, should we get input from a wider audience on these things, or should it just be in like an MR process where we propose this and get a review and that'd be it. I think there's some obvious places off the top that we can start to use local, and we'd see immediate benefits. I think the one that stands out is SeatLink, which we have a lot of issues with. We're making a lot of Zora requests in SeatLink, and using our local cache for that, I think we'd see a huge benefit. That's just one that comes to mind, but yeah, there's probably others we can leverage. But on the flip side of that, like knowing when we should always use remote, that would be good to maybe get a list of those.
Yeah, but there are still many like unknown places. When we need to use the local or the remote record, when we need to update the local record if the remote one is getting updated. And I think like there will be many things like that until everyone suddenly starts using the remote records for every operation.
One thing to note in all this is that the local database is always in the read-only state. Like a customer or someone cannot actually make any modifications to it. So no matter what, at the end of the day, my remote Zora is still going to be the one which holds the real records of everything. So it's never going to be the scenario like, oh, let me update my local custom field and that's going to sync to the remote to tell that like, okay, here is the new custom field update which has happened. That's never going to happen. The update to the custom field or update to anything will still happen to that Zora. We will pull that data and save it locally. That's how the whole idea and the plan is.
Yeah, I get the idea, and I think you all know my reaction to that.
One other thing to think about is just think about ways to calculate drift, because these are atomic callouts. It's really hard to notice like how bad the drift has gotten. So how can you sort of do a diff across the two databases? Because at some point, if the diff is too big, then a full sync is needed.
Well, I feel like we can utilize the built-in Postgres functions. Let's say we create two, like, I think Postgres actually supports replication in a single database through between different schemas or so. So we could like end up having like two databases, actually one with like our local records and another one is actually the CustomersDot database. Then we can set up replication between those two by using like specifying which tables we need to replicate. And that could solve our that problem. But still, that requires a spec issue.
I think I'm more concerned about not so much about the local dev environment, but CustomersDot production and Zora production data.
I think the that drift should be minimum here, right? So I guess we are hoping that the callouts work, 99% of the time, which I think they do now, right? So I think the times where we actually have to retrieve this should be, you know, once, I don't know, once a month, I would say, or something like that. So I don't think there should be a big drift there. The only, you know, the worst case scenario here would be that I don't know, either Zora or CustomersDot is down for a significant period of time, right? And then we'll have to catch up on callouts, I guess.
I want to. Sorry.
Yeah,
I wanted
just
to.
quick. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I
will
wanted
say
to.
that if we, sorry, I will just at a quick note. But if we think about doing a full resync, we should keep in mind the Zora API limits. No.
I think they're.
Please.
I wanted to add that if you're going to go with the syncing, I think it will be really valuable to what Vitaly said, that we can report our failed syncs, like the things that never made it to CustomersDot. It will be very valuable to actually store the call out, you know, with the ID. And maybe we can then visualize the sync call out per hours in the admin or somewhere. So we have kind of like a system where we can see if things are getting worse. And eventually we can export that and send it to SOAR and ask, like, why in this month we have this many lost callouts? Because then we will have a number to actually ask about. And if we store it, we also can make a diff and make sure we don't process the same callout twice. And we can optimize on processing on our end, but most of it, if you're really pulling that, it would be nice to have a source of data to provide to Sora to ask for a review, at least, on why we're not getting things.
So we already have that with the provisioning tracking system. I think it saves the callout ID as well, because I remember having to replay that at some point.
It does. I think it's the provision system pulls both, the failed and the not failed. But we don't do kind of like a differentiation in things that failed because we never got the call out and things that failed because something failed in the provisioning itself. So it's not easy to look at. But there are like graphs in Rails admin, Rails admin, you know, that will draw that for you if we want to, in time, kind of like the counts per hour and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the main question still remains. For instance, when I receive a local record, how do I know this is the latest version actually?
What do you mean? Like you receive an ID and you pull the latest version. I think that's how we're doing it for other.
No, I mean, for instance, when I work on some business-related code and I use one of our local tables and I pull the record from it, how do I know that our local table contains the latest version right now?
Do you need to trust your local records? Yeah.
That's the whole idea, what we are trying to do. I mean, like with all these redundancies, having those cron jobs or anything, it's to make sure that my local is in sync with Zora. If that is not happening, then something we need to look into more, like what can we make sure that it is in sync with Zora, that we definitely need to work on in the future. But as of now, the hopes are like it is going to be the one what you're requesting from Zora, you're getting exactly the same from the local. That's the whole idea as of now.
Yeah, that's true. But like the whole idea of local records, at least in my opinion, looks like a really like a workaround. That was another idea. In my opinion, like the whole idea of local records is to create another set of problems that we need to solve right now.
So basically, we are building towards having an offline working environment in CustomersDot. I see that is valuable, and also we're making the requests more efficient and all by using local records. So I think there is a trade-off of everything that is good, and I think we might invest in what Jerome mentioned, the drift system, because even if it's expensive, we might have to calculate that drift across the local records at least once a month, I don't know, and see if something is really gotten off, and then refresh that table or correct those records. Because like it can be an iteration to drift that system, but if we're going to trust the local, we need to know if we really can trust it. So
I guess to my point before, with the last sync tone, maybe we can monitor that, right? Or if there's something, I guess, to be more reactive instead of checking, okay, what happened in the last month, right? It would be good to have an alert if something is not in sync, or if it hasn't been in sync for an X amount of time, for example.
but if it hasn't changed, it might not get synced like once a year, and might still be in sync if it's a customer that just renews, the subscription.
Yeah, I guess we could still track that the cron job runs. I don't know what if updates, when was last synced. I assume that even, for example, we could still update the record with, okay, nothing happened here, right? But it was last synced on this day or something. I don't know. I haven't put much thought, but there might be a way to know, if something is not synced or up to date. I think ideally we don't have to query everything. I think that'd be crazy. I think we need to look into other ways of doing it.
Yeah, perhaps this is another spike issue to look into different ways we could calculate drift, like whether it's looking at things that have changed over the last 24 hours and making sure that those changes made it into our system. Luckily, because of the way Zora stores things with its own versioning, we don't have to worry about drift with the individual records as much. I mean, a little bit with the custom fields because those don't trigger new versions. But what I think the thing we have to worry about is probably what Vitaly was saying, like knowing if we have the active version, like the latest version, did that make it into our system in a reasonable amount of time? So I think the drift, like you're saying, James, it's hopefully going to be minimal based on the way that Zora stores things and its versioning. But yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see once we start, storing the stuff and have the call outs in place. Okay, any other thoughts? I know we're well over time, but I think it was really productive conversation. I didn't know it was going to lead to this much conversation, but it's great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shri. All right, appreciate it. We'll close it here and see you in 3 weeks.